Typhoon. The runway to RAF Lookers is about 2 miles as the crow flies in the direction I'm pointing it. So basically they fly right past here. It's great. Especially when they're coming back in. They'll often come in, they'll orientate themselves to the runway, and then they'll fly around in a big arc, literally over this is a small village, and there's a field just 300 yards in that direction, 300-400 yards, and they'll literally fly right over that field as they come in and land. It's great. But when they take off, especially this time in the afternoon, quite often they'll go kind of ballistic, go straight up. It's wonderful. Everything rattles. Anyway, this video, which is kind of a little bit out of the blue, a bit like the Typhoon, the X-Wing, it's finished. Good God. Wonders will never cease. After I made the last video, the update, I had a look at the work in progress shelf, and I thought, you know, I really must get some of that stuff moving again. And the thing with the X-Wing was that it was the thing with the X-Wing was that it was about 80% finished anyway. But if you remember, one of the reasons I put it aside was I kind of weathered it the way I weather my aircraft, which was darkening the panel lines, and all the panels were more or less all the same colour, which isn't the way the X-Wings actually are. If you look at the movie, and in particular the special edition, regardless of how you feel about the special edition, but it's a good reference point, especially for Red 2, because if you remember the part 1 of this series, if it can even be called a series because there's only 2 parts, I show all the clips from the special edition, which it just so happens that the main X-Wing on display at all times is Red 2, because we can see the 2 markings on the wings. And you'll notice that the weathering really is very panel specific. There's one panel will be one shade of grey, one will be another. I wonder if there's 50 of them in total. Anyway, rather than the panel lines. So I went back to the thing and I started masking it. A panel here and a panel there and a panel blah blah blah. And it took me days just to do one wing set. And then basically I sprayed it with a very, very diluted mix of grey. I was just picking greys at random, so that there were tonal variations. And then when I took the masking tape off, it was like, really? All that work for that? And so therefore I decided, because the panel lines are because the panels are separated by recessed panel lines, I then took a brush and various shades of grey, very, very dilute, and just sort of ran the brush along the panel lines. The capillary action then took the paint thinner solution along those lines without going over into the next panel, as it were, and just painted each panel by brush. Yes, Rob, by brush. But because it was such a thin mix, you don't see any brush strokes, it just dries kind of flat. Plus I then toned them all down using this thing, which is now one of my most important tools that I use. It's a burnishing brush, and it's actually a sort of a stem of condensed, glass fibre, which obviously as you start using it, because it's basically what you do. It's kind of, I don't know what you would class it as. It's a cross between a brush and a sanding stick, and it just, it's not good for actual sanding as such, but as its name suggests, it's for burnishing. For example, like the Nanchang here, which is nearly finished, but we'll get to that at some later stage. I sprayed it with a matte varnish. Now I don't like matte varnished aircraft, because then when you see aircraft in the flesh, there is always a kind of a reflective nature about the surface of it. It's maybe not high gloss, but it's certainly not flat. So I sprayed it with flat just to even everything out, the decals and whatnot. And then going over it with this along panel lines, just in certain panel areas, you create a variation in surface reflectivity, if you like. So it creates a very realistic overall effect once you get used to using it. But anyway, I did that on the X-Wing as well, just on the panels and the centre areas of the panels. And because this paint thinner solution was so thin, going over it with this did actually remove it in some areas. So again, it created further tonal variations as such. Oh, the R2 unit. Yeah, the R2 unit. Now, please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments or whatever. Excuse me. I did some extensive research on this, more research than perhaps was called for. But according to FineMolds instructions, Wedge's R2 unit, because they give you little decals for the various R2 units, whether you're making red 1 or red leader or red 5 or whatever. They say that Wedge's R2 unit is unpainted. And I thought, oh, okay, well, fair enough. You know, FineMolds, they're fairly good at what they do. But I went online, obviously, and had a look, and I found a website online. Well, obviously online. I didn't find it in the shops or behind a bush. That went into quite considerable detail about every R2 unit in the entire saga. Every R2 unit. And according to this website, who I was not going to doubt, Wedge Antilles R2 unit was a red domed, white panelled astromech droid, if you like. Now, if you go and look at the scenes from the original theatrical release, the 1977 version, you will see behind Wedge, not very often, but you will see behind him little glimpses of a red dome. However, that being said, if you look at the special edition with all the CGI enhancements, regardless of how you feel about these, it is now part of the canon, as it were. If you look at those enhancements, and every scene that they've done, that they've added shots of additional X-Wings, it's always red too, because I don't know whether they just programmed that one in and that's the one they always use, but if you look at the R2 unit, it's exactly the same as R2-D2. It's a white-bodied, silver-domed with blue panels on it. But I decided to go with the original one. It's a Tucano trainer. Quite a nice sound, isn't it? Nice powerful engine on it. That's what the pilots train on before they move on to the jets, which would presumably be a Hawk. So yeah, so I've gone with the red dome, white panelled R2 unit. I'm not sure what its full designation is, R2's whatever. And that's what I'm going with. But if I'm wrong, please correct me. Not that there's much I'm going to do about it, but you know, it might make you feel better. So there we go, that's the X-Wings done. And I've actually entered this into the competition at Telford next week, which is less than a week actually, into the sci-fi section, obviously, because where else would I put it? And I'm not sure how it's going to do, to be honest, because the sci-fi section, it's not like aircraft where there's the 144th in scale, there's 172nd, 148th, 132nd, 124th. There's only one sci-fi category, and it's all scales. And I've had to put this one into the detailed class because I've used the resin cockpit, and I did that with the tube body detail, so that means it's not out of the box, so I can't put it into that category. Which means it's going to be up against like big stuff, like big Millennium Falcons and big Battlestar Galacticas and goodness knows what, big scratch built stuff. So it's going to be in a rather hotly contested category, but we'll see anyway. You have to register in advance. It's not one of these competitions where you can turn up on the day and think, have a look at the competition and go, oh, yeah, okay, I'll stick mine in. You have to register. In fact, registration finished on the 2nd of November there. Doesn't mean to say that, I mean, if I get down there and I see stuff, it's like, oh, well, there's not much point putting it in. Although that's not really in the spirit of it, I suppose. But if you do get down, you think, ah, there's no point. You know, if there's like 10 beautiful X-Wings, bigger and snazzier, studio quality as it were, then you don't have to put it in, but just stick it on the display table. And if any of you are down at Telford, I can make it to Telford, have a look out for us. We'll be at the East Nook Model Club. We'll be next to Edinburgh. East Nook will be a bit hard to remember, but if you see the Edinburgh table, we'll be next to them. Although we'll rarely ever be at our table because we'll be on walk around most of the time. But we'll have our rugby shirts with East Nook Model Club on it, and if remember this thing, then if you see me, just give us a wee shout. Say hello, or whatever, or just completely ignore me or turn around and go the other way. But anyway, yeah, so there we go. So I'll give you a wee update on the Nanchang shortly. Well, it'll probably be after Telford now. It's weird. I don't know whether it's because I'm building it for a magazine. I mean, I'm not an expert modeller anyway, and I don't do expert models, but for some unknown reason I keep screwing up with these things, and in the most basic, elementary ways that I don't do on any of my own models. Whether it's some subconscious thing that's trying to subvert me or something, I don't know. But I just keep making the most elementary errors. You know, I'm like, seriously? Did I just do that? Did I just do that to that kit? And other things that, for example, I'll just, before I go, when I mask, I always put the canopy on first and then paint, because that way you can address any sort of the join between the canopy and the plane. If you have to fill it and sand it, you can do that beforehand. You mask it, and then when you paint it, it all gets painted as one, and when you're weathering it, it all gets weathered as one, so there's a consistency there. Now this is the simplest canopy you could possibly imagine. It's like one of these polytunnels that you put your plants under, and it has 4 straight bars going right across. I mean, what could be easier? I mean, I'd have 1/44 Stuka canopy, for heaven's sake. Could I get this one right? Could I buggery? And then when I peeled all the masking paper off, there was this big wad of dusty gunk had crammed itself in between the front of the canopy and the instrument area. And it would not move. I had to break the canopy off to get this thing out. It's like, oh, it's, you know what, doesn't matter. So anyway, if I see you at Telford, great. If not, I'll give you all a little shout afterwards to let you know how I got her on, and as I say, a further update on the Nanchang.